Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. Just before the stream, I switched from Wi Fi to my Ethernet connection, so I really hoped it didn't screw up OBS too much. Sometimes it does. It's a good app for being free, but it still gives me panic on a regular basis because it's like it doesn't take much to break it. Okay, my iPad shows that the stream is working. Few likes, a few people coming in. That's great. I appreciate all of your support. We've had some new people joining. That's really great, building up to Dub. As I already promised, will be covering WWDC live. I will be providing you, of course, coverage afterwards. I shuffled a little bit around with my work time, so that week I am a little bit more free. Riley joining the chat as per usual, saying hello. Hello to everyone. Today is not such a packed stream as sometimes we have like a huge Geeker Van video plus all kinds of news. We are getting now very close to WWDC, so some leakers, including obviously our resident tech Jesus, Apple Jesus, Mark Gurman, doubling down and adding to the already pretty long rumor list. We're getting some solid summaries on hardware even that we're expecting for September. We have a pretty good understanding at this point what, for example, the iPhone 17 Pro lineup is going to look like. So yeah, plenty still to talk about. I moved my table a little bit, so now my leg is constantly hitting it. So if there's a little bit of stutter, it's not because I'm like a green grass video where it's like just like the Bourne movies where everything is shaky. That's not on purpose. That's because I am hitting my table with my leg on accident. Before we get fully started, as always, do all the YouTube jazz as we call it around here. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it, and comment live, comment afterwards. You guys know I love getting your opinions, your agreements, your disagreements, your suggestions for future topics, and just in general other topics. So that's a big help. You can also leave super chats or super stickers while I'm live. You can become a channel member here on YouTube. Shout out to Angelica, Max, Maximus, and Steve. And of course, you can also support us, by which I mean me. This is a solo operation here on Patreon. So the link for that is in the description of this channel. Without further ado, let's actually look into a reviewer who I respect a lot. I have grown to respect him a little less over the last year or so because I found more mistakes than I would like to in his videos. It's not as bad as with Dave 2D, where I think his smartphone reviews and stuff like that are actually have gone pretty bad, unfortunately. Like his laptop reviews and stuff like that are still decent, and when it comes to more like gaming oriented hardware, I guess he still provides good stuff. But like for the really nerdy stuff, I just like to look at the likes of Gamers Nexus, Hardware Unboxed, right? And then for mainstream, it's MKBHD, Mr. Who's the Boss. And then there's, of course, all the Apple-specific coverage that I watch, well, because of the nature of this channel. But MrMobile has always been somewhere in between. Now, he is very much an Android guy, and he's very much a foldable guy, which puts him away from a clear focus on Apple. But he does cover smartphones primarily, which means he does less mistakes than those who try to cover laptops and tablets and smartphones and smartwatches. So yeah, that's, I guess, my excuse to be watching him. I also think that he tests a lot of Samsung hardware in general, and specifically, like, he likes the flip devices. And the flip devices, in my opinion, are kind of the thing that is closest to the Galaxy S25 Edge. So that's why I picked out his review. Most reviews will tell you a few unequivocal things about the Galaxy S25 Edge, which is it doesn't have the greatest battery life, to put it mildly. It feels nice in the hand, definitely, but for the price, it better be. And then thirdly, for that price, it also better offer more than it currently does. And I think a lot of these points will be nicely reflected in that review. And I wanted to watch it with you together. Marquez just put out the video on Android 16. I have no idea the kinds of video what Mr. Rooster Boss is currently putting out. Like the videos that get the most views from him are like him just testing like dozens of different tech gadgets, and that's not my cup of tea. Like I don't like those like videos. Like it's not as bad as like, oh look, I found trash on Temu or Wish, and I'm like, of course you found trash on Temu or Wish. It's Temu or Wish. Of course there's only basically trash on there. Yeah. So when it comes to serious coverage, shout out to Mr. Michael Fisher. I always forget it's written like that because I want to go with the German SCH writing. But yeah, the MrMobile, big channel, a lot of views per videos, pretty respected, and I just like to say this before I watch it. When I watch like Marquez or whoever, like who has like 10 to close to 20 million subscribers, I know I don't need to explain them to you, nor do I think I need to explain to you who MrMobile is, but I would like to explain why I'm using his videos. It's not just because, oh, he has a Galaxy S25 Edge review. That's not how this channel operates. I used to in the past just look at sometimes pretty random videos that were like the first out. Like I remember watching a few tech tablets video and stuff like that. But over the while, I just haven't grown to like their content so much. And that's why I pretty much don't react to their content anymore. Here with MrMobile, there's still a decent amount of respect. Without further ado, let's get started.
This is the thinnest phone I've ever covered. It's 5.2 millimeters thick, masses just 136 grams, and it was released 9 years ago. Yeah, next to Motorola's Moto Z from 2016, Samsung's new Galaxy S25 Edge hardly seems to be the engineering marvel its maker claims.
Yeah, that's especially considering that we are now looking at like 6.7-inch devices, right? There's a lot of like horizontal and vertical space here. It's literally just the thickness that is negatively impacted by this decision. There is still plenty of space inside the device, and arguably by the standards of like 5 to 6 years ago, that battery life that is being delivered here would probably not be terrible, would probably be still somewhat acceptable. But we like literally like over the last 6 months, we started getting devices in a very similar form factor. Yes, they are thicker, and yes, they are heavier, but yes, they also often undercut this in price, have more and better cameras, brighter displays and everything. And they will give you not just like 10% larger batteries, not even 20% larger batteries, but we're literally looking at like 50 to 60% larger batteries, like Vivo delivering 6100 milliampere hours versus this being a sub 4000 milliampere hour battery. So this is not an excuse that I will give Apple either, right? If the iPhone 17 Air actually launches with a sub 3000 milliampere hour battery at a time when the smaller iPhone 16e, with most likely a less demanding processor and the same C1 modem, right? This device has 4000 milliampere hours to feed, again, those less demanding components. So I will not give this excuse to Apple. And I'm like, even, by the way, even if Apple's device is like lower priced than this one, I think there is a price at which I could expect those, accept those shortcomings, like around 600 to 700 maybe. But most likely Apple's device is going to come into around 900 to 1,000. And this one is 1,100. There's absolutely no chance in hell that I'm accepting these shortcomings, and neither should you.
It doesn't do anything novel with its slender form factor, nor does it leverage new technologies to limit the disadvantages of going so slim, nor does it push the frontier of design in...
I don't care as much about that, and quite honestly, I've always been a bit iffy on MrMobile's priorities when it comes to the pioneering edge of design language and his focus on foldables and being super forgiving to them, even when they really, like, they got better over time, right? It's like that Monty Python joke. It's like, I got better, which I guess is somewhat true, at least for the foldables. But like, I think this is a sleek looking product. I think the camera bump actually looks pretty nice. I like that dual like step approach, similar to how Apple does it. I like obviously how clean it mostly looks. Yeah, I like the use of titanium. There's very little that I would be complaining about here.
Anyway, even the colors are frustratingly derivative of Apple's
Yeah, I
joyless.
don't care about that either because I would probably just get the matte black version. I like blue. I've said that time and time again. I had Sierra blue on my iPhone 13 Pro Max. I have titanium blue on my iPhone 15 Pro Max. And most likely I will be buying sky blue on my upcoming iPhone 17 Pro Max or 17 Ultra or whatever it's going to be called, right? Again, these are priorities, but by MrMobile that I don't agree with. I also don't like him calling out Apple here when Samsung themselves hasn't given us better colors for years. In fact, yes, on the Pro lineup, Apple still uses very like subtle colors in a way, unless you count like the gold that we used to get and shit like that. But like on the actual like non-pro devices, which technically this is not a pro device, this is not an ultra device, Apple has now some of the most vibrant devices out there, from pink and ultramarine. So I see that very often where it's very easy to attack Apple based on memes rather than the actual reality on the ground, right? Memes do have a kernel of truth in them. They are often a result of like years of a built-up perception. But like I watched, for example, a part of the Linus Tech Tips reaction to all the NVIDIA drama. In fact, I briefly mentioned that NVIDIA drama on this channel too. But like Linus immediately, after even acknowledging the issue, started in the very first like 2 or 3 minutes, like talking about that everything that NVIDIA does in terms of the control that they exert over influencers and the media that they choose, right, is very similar to Apple, and that those two companies kind of stick out. And like in the beginning, he talked more about Apple than NVIDIA, and there was like this obvious copium approach because Linus Tech Tips, unlike Hardware Unbox, for example, does accept direct ads from NVIDIA, right? When you look, for example, at Hardware Unbox, they accept ads from like MSI, Gigabyte, Asus, right? Companies, many of which do partner with NVIDIA, but they don't take money directly from AMD, NVIDIA, or Intel. And you see similar things with like Jay's 2 Cents, Gamers Nexus, less so with certain others. Like I know Digital Foundry takes money also directly from NVIDIA. But like Linus couldn't shut up about Apple, right? Which like anybody who knows anything, like Apple chooses the media to which they give their phones to. But that's about it. There is zero direction from Apple. Like there's a review guidebook, I guess, which is typical for every company. It's basically about informing you what are the new features of a device, right? Like rough expectations of how Apple expects something to perform. That's completely industry typical. Apple does not do bought previews that guarantee a certain coverage of features, like for example the way NVIDIA did like with multi-frame generation, and even prohibiting the usage of like comparing it or even like demanding the use of products to be compared that don't even have this feature. Like Linus just kept on shitting on Apple without any like he later of course acknowledged what NVIDIA did. I'm not saying he completely downplayed it, but he like so overplayed the things Apple does just because I guess he's still butthurt that they are not like in the day one reviewer like list, which is like so stupid. And also like he also talked about Apple exerting influence over their partners. he basically said that in one sentence. Apple doesn't have partners the way Nvidia does or Intel does. Apple does not have other companies building motherboards for them or the actual GPU portions for them. They used to, I guess, but like even these comparisons are so stupid. Apple has like influence over authorized resellers and repair shops that Apple guarantees do not give you like bootleg parts and don't give you a bad service and shit like that. Apple exerts a control over them, not to control us as consumers, but to control the way we consumers actually interact with Apple. Like, I don't want Apple to become the same way as all these other companies. Yet Linus presented it like, oh, Apple is evil for basically doing the same shit as Nvidia, even though Apple never claims to be like, oh, you can take every part and build it however you like. I'm so fed up with like memes, basically, where people don't have actual knowledge of topics. Like the reason why, for example, I didn't analyze in length to you the Nvidia controversy is very simple. It's because while I do know plenty, it's not my main level of expertise, right? It's not the main topic I cover, and I know it's not even close to the main topic you guys are interested in. And I feel like we get that with Apple more than with any other company, right? For years, right, Apple was like shit on for the removal of the headphone jack and that courage statement. But fact of the matter is, if you guys actually think it's such an important feature, and for years some even said, oh, buy this phone, it does have a headphone jack, right? You are basically proving Apple correct by claiming, oh, it's stupid to get rid of the headphone jack. It's going to hurt your product and whatever, right? Even though, by the way, months before the iPhone 7, Motorola had brought out a smartphone that didn't have a headphone jack. And like it's literally just because Apple is kind of always the biggest guy in the room, whether they want to or not. Like, they will be mentioned for everything, like freaking colors. Like, look at most of the Chinese smartphones. They don't have too many vibrant color options in like their ultra lineup. Sometimes they give you like leather shit and stuff like that, but really, like, it's not just been Apple that has been like less reliant on super vibrant colors. And yet here we are. It's like, oh, frustratingly derivative of Apple's joyless Pro palette. It's such a bullshit statement. I just cannot, like, I cannot abide by it.
On paper, the S25 Edge only reinforces the perception that...
So that was a big, like, what, 5 to 8 minute rant just by me? I'm so sorry.
Company that led the Android smartphone space for so long...
Yeah, that's also not quite true. I think that even, like, yes, because in broad sales, Samsung was the leader. But like, I would argue if you go back to the HTC One back in the day, there were some silly decisions made, like the 4-megapixel camera, and for a while they refused to adopt AMOLED technology, right? But beyond like the screens, I really struggle to think of like super revolutionary stuff that Samsung did over the years. Like, I guess sometimes they tried stuff that then didn't pan out too much. And I guess if you are really caring for form over function, right, those curved edges and whatever, which have all been given up on. If you care about the bullshit that they tried to claim about, like, oh, look, our product, like, they bragged about having wireless charging, right, before Apple. And now, what is the current state of affairs? Apple has faster wireless charging. Apple has G2/MagSafe compatibility. Apple has a giant ecosystem built around MagSafe accessories to the point that like companies like Samsung are building like cases that include basically MagSafe magnets. Like all of this gets forgotten very quickly, that putting in a feature in a product does not make like a company innovative specifically or the end product that much better. Like, and I'm a good example of that. When I had the iPhone XS Max, for example. In fact, it's the longest owned iPhone I ever had. I had it for 3 years. All other iPhones I either owned for 1 year or for 2 years. It's just that when the XS Max came out, wasn't quite too smitten by the 11 Pros, and then when the 12 Pros came out, like I didn't like that the battery life was actually a little bit worse than on the 11 Pros, and I also pretty much knew that, oh, next year we're getting ProMotion, and that's something I really cared about. So I was like, you know what, I can make it for another year. But when I had it for 3 years and it had wireless charging, guess who didn't own a single freaking wireless charger or anything and couldn't give a crap about it, even after Apple, the supposed like Apple sheep who likes everything Apple does, right? Did I go out and buy a wireless charger or whatever? No, I couldn't care less about it. But then when Apple brought MagSafe, I loved it, and I bought by the way, I didn't buy Apple's MagSafe charger. I bought a Belkin charger, one that has a little bit of a kickstand and is a little bit thicker and has a braided cable and everything, right? Like this idea that Samsung used to lead the Android market, I think that was mostly a result of there being very little like competition that still survives, right? HTC is not anywhere close to being the company it used to be. Neither is Motorola, definitely not Nokia. And then LG does not exist. BlackBerry does not exist. So yeah, like, well, LG exists, but not the smartphone part of it. Yeah, I just like, there is a little bit of like a historical revisionism, I feel like, when people talk about Samsung. Like, I do respect Samsung, and I do think they have contributed to innovation in the smartphone space, but I don't think nearly enough as some people pretend they did.
Has finally run out of ideas. But that's on paper. To see if the reality matched the expectation, I made the Edge my primary phone at Google I/O in Mountain View, and as always, the real world had some surprises in store. Before we get going, let's take a tour of the hardware of my review sample from Samsung. And while I hate saying it because it seems like such a cop-out, I'm bound to do so anyway. This is one of those products you have to hold to understand.
That's absolutely true, and I have no problem in saying it's a sleek-looking product, thin, pretty symmetrical bezels, thin,
and the
light,
effectively
even the camera bumper says that looks neat. I like the colors. I'm like
edge-to-edge AMOLED, 5G,
Mr. Fisher here,
processor, etc.
Yeah.
My comparison to the Moto Z doesn't hold as much water.
Well, one thing that I do actually think is interesting is when it comes to the actual form factor. This is probably like a 5.5-inch 16:9 screen or something like that, right? When you think about making it like a 19.5:9 screen, you stretch it out, make it also a tiny bit wider, you would actually end up with a very similar product, like when it comes to like the space internally that you still get.
It's a different phone for a different time with different priorities, and it is potently portable. That makes it a direct competitor not to the other S25 phones, but to Samsung's Galaxy Flips.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it does make it a competitor, especially to the Galaxy S25 Plus, which obviously shares similarly sized screen, a lot of similar specifications, but just with a lot better battery life. And as we looked, for example, even at GSM Arena's testing, better sustained cooling. But I guess it doesn't quite have the same main camera, which this has nothing to do with space or even money. There could have easily been like room both financially and like volumetrically for a 200 megapixel camera in the S25 Plus. Yeah, but I guess for portability, yes, the main competitor here is the Flip. Because instead of targeting a thin profile to make it portable, it targets a reduced, if this is X, then this is a Y axis.
6, which is also aimed at those who prioritize portability at the same exact price to boot, a penny shy of 1,100 clams. And from some angles, it's easy to see the engineering lessons Samsung has incorporated from its
Yeah,
flip.
that's also what I'm saying about the iPhone 17 Air. In fact, I do believe that the iPhone 17 Air is probably a little bit of like an engineering, like, not an oversight, but like basically like a leftover from designing foldables and just trying to miniaturize technologies. And they just said, you know what? A lot of people are getting the Pros. The people who are getting the regular version are increasingly focusing on very different things, right? They focus on the aesthetics, the color choices. Let us actually double down on that to a degree. And then the people who really want like something premium, they can get the freaking Pro. And if they want to save a little bit of money, they can get a last gen Pro, right? So it's not like we are necessarily going to lose a ton of people by repurposing the Pro into an Air. And I think that Samsung did not do that. Well, I do think that, yes, they obviously did take what they learned from making foldables. It's unfortunate that I don't think Samsung's foldables are even that good these days, but like Samsung's, like the S25 Edge existence, it basically owes everything to the rumor of the iPhone 17 Air. It's a completely reactionary product that was quickly thrown together to counter what Apple is doing. If this was actually a well thought out product, it would have come out substantially later, and it would have focused on newer technologies, a newer, more efficient panel, the anti-reflective coating that we have seen Samsung already implement on the Galaxy S25 Ultra. We would have potentially seen compromises that are smart, could reduce cost and could reduce volumetric, like basically usage internally. Stuff like millimeter wave support, absolutely unnecessary for a product that's primarily targeting being thin and light. I think we would have seen some kind of higher density battery, whether we're talking silicon carbon or stacked batteries. So we would have seen something. And again, we would have seen a product that tries to do more, maybe incorporate something like a MagSafe ring. So this way, like for example, Apple is rumored to bring out a battery pack, right? Like this would be a prime candidate for this. But hey, guess what? It doesn't have MagSafe or Qi 2 native compatibility. So if you even wanted to connect it to a battery pack like this, like a wireless one, you would have to get a case for it that supports MagSafe. So yeah, this is not a well thought out product.
And Fold series phones. So when we do take the Edge to I/O in a sec, the Flip 6 is what we'll be comparing it to when it comes to the cameras, which have been reduced to 2 here too.
It's a little bit silly because, for one, the MSRP is $1099, but the foldables of Samsung drop in price pretty quickly. So I assume it's probably more of a $900 product these days, if not less, depending on what kind of deal you can get. And then the other important point is that the Z Flip 7 is not too far away. So comparing this to the Flip 6, well, sure, technically that makes the Flip 6 the most current Samsung foldable to compare it to, almost, unless you count that special edition Fold that was made for Korea. I don't see why you wouldn't compare it to a better foldable, right? Like the Motorola Razr, which he has explicitly said is like the best flip style product right now.
Megapixel primary and a 12 megapixel ultra wide, placed on a plinth that gives the Edge a lot more wiggle than you want on a tabletop.
That's unfortunate.
Fortunately, my sponsor D-Brand helps out with that.
I don't care.
Prism protects hardware. Not much. A Gorilla Glass Ceramic 2 on the front, Victus 2 on the back, titanium in between.
So
to allay your
durable
fears about
materials, but nothing groundbreaking, which is fine. I don't expect that. Yes, I would expect it if we had like not so durable technologies and materials. But at this point, I think that whatever built into the iPhone Pros, with Ceramic Shield, with the Galaxy Ultras, with Gorilla Glass, Victus, and whatever, I think that those are good enough even for like a thinness and lightness focused product like this. So that is not really my complaint. Again, I've talked about how I think it would have been smarter to make the product a little thicker and therefore a little bit more bend resistant. But then you switch out titanium for aluminum, you make it more lightweight in terms of its chassis, allow more weight for the battery without actually increasing the weight of the final product. And whatever you lose in durability from going away from titanium, you regain it by just making the product 0.5, 0.6 millimeters thicker again. So yeah, I've said it again and again, and it's a lesson that I think Apple might actually be learning if we are going to see like iPhone Pros potentially switching to aluminum this year, but also getting thicker. So that might actually be Apple doing exactly what I just suggested, right? Giving up some durability of titanium, but regaining it by making the product a little bit thicker, and then using the reduced weight of titanium versus aluminum to put more components into the actual product. So that way you can have better cooling, better battery life, better cameras, whatever, without actually dramatically or even at all increasing the weight of the product. And if you make it thicker, you still make it like nicely feeling in the hand. So I think that any product under 1 centimeter of thickness really doesn't have to worry about how thick it is. In fact, on iPads, I have actually complained when we started moving under what I thought was the absolute Goldilocks zone, which was 7.5 millimeters on the original iPad Air. I thought that felt absolutely incredible. And I would have accepted it being slightly thinner, like the 6.9 millimeters that Apple eventually targeted on like their larger iPads, because it would be okay. This one is a bit bigger, so it probably should be a bit thinner to not be as heavy, right? But now we are at 5.1 and 5.3 millimeters. And now whatever you're doing with the overall chassis materials, unless you build it out of solid titanium or whatever, it's really not gonna be the most durable thing ever. So yeah, so I get the compromises that both companies are targeting to make something thin here. I'm just not super happy with just how thin they want to make it be.
And stuffed into the center, the other
By the way, that like multitasking, I know it's customizable, but who the fuck uses this design?
we're all afraid of, a 3900 milliamp hour battery, smaller even than the one in the Flip. I've been using the phone for a few days already to let it adjust to my usage patterns, so now that we're marinated, let's hit the road and see how it holds up on a travel day. We start at 7 a.m. with a wait and save Uber request to the airport and a little Spotify session to download songs for the flight. On that ride to the airport, with Uber codes provided by Google, I catch up on some email and also dive into the morning summary from Galaxy AI.
Okay, it looks like the display is pretty bright throughout this, which I guess makes sense. It's a very sunny day.
Which, unfortunately, is about as bare bones as it
Yeah,
was back
this
in
is
January.
something that I feel like if Apple were to launch this, it would be a constant meme in the tech community. But I guess Samsung can get away with like launching. This is worse than like the HTC like daily overview that was provided. What was it called? Like it was a full side panel that you get if you went from the main home screen, just swipe to the right. So I guess you open up what's left of it. And then you just see that it's like, you get like your calendars and whatever. Even on iPhone, by the way, there is a bit of like AI here where, for example, I don't think that Apple does it that much anymore because they're transitioning to a different like AI algorithm and whatever. But like in the past, for example, when you connected your earpods like through the Lightning connector, knowing that you're probably about to want to play music or whatever, your phone would suggest to you music and or even a podcast. And the way it also partially did it, from what I understood, is it would account for like what are your workout times. So let's say you save your workouts through the Apple Watch, then your phone would know, oh, do you want to listen to like a podcast, or do you want to listen to like your more fast rock music or whatever? Now again, it wasn't perfect, but it was something. And I feel like this is literally nothing, right? Your calendars, your weather, your reminders, putting all that thing in one page. It's not AI, right? Just call it the Samsung Day overview, and that's it, right? Like, this is just garbage. And not even because the final implementation is so bad, but because it has so little to do with all this push towards AI and how smart your products are in understanding your day-to-day usage.
January when I first tried it. I need to test this phone as I would any daily driver, so at the airport I pair it with my Galaxy Watch Ultra and Beats Fit Pro review samples. And even though you'll notice other phones sitting around in some of these shots, keep in mind I'm using the Edge as my primary. I load up my boarding pass in the Delta app, which forces the screen to its max of 2600 nits.
Yeah, but only for short periods of time. Also, no, it does not have 2600 nits of all-screen brightness. That's HDR brightness. The brightness you're getting here is around 1500.
To SFO, I blot out the engine roar with 2 hours of podcasts, and I mute the roar of my thoughts with 2 hours of Spotify. All the while, I'm doing socials, taking notes, slinging more emails, and even messing around with the K2HF1 sent to me by Keychron, which is an impractical but effective ergonomic solution to the seatback tray
That does not look too ergonomic, buddy.
tables that are too small for laptops. And now keep in mind that my screen brightness has basically been bottomed out for 6 hours, thanks to this being a plane load of total killjoys who keep their window shades closed, even on a middle of the...
I guess that's business class, right? That does not look like economy. Yeah, so I guess those people really just want to see what's on their tablets and laptops.
Day Transcon. Nevertheless, by the time I touch down at SFO, we're mere moments from the first death of the day after a...
Okay, screen on time 7 hours and 6 minutes, screen off 4 hours. Like, I hate combined usage because I think that the impact of screen off time is usually just so vastly different. Like, I do prefer just knowing the screen on time. Yeah, I understand screen off, listening to music, whatever. It will consume battery life, but like always dislike like this combined usage. That being said, of course, under 12 hours, especially with much of it running at extremely low brightness levels, is not great. Now, I cannot guarantee you like how good or bad like the internal, like if he even used Wi-Fi there and whatever. If he didn't, that's terrible battery life. But I guess since most of it is like Chrome, I assume he still used internet on there.
11 hours of usage. And the phone does give up the ghost in the car en route to Google's hotel.
Yep.
And that means we get to test top-up speed.
25
30-watt Nomad
watts.
charger, you may recall from my travel tech video, we get to 57%.
I don't like testing with chargers that are very close to the advertised limit. I think you should use something more high-end in that regard. Not to benefit the phone, but to like have a good assessment. And if you really want to make it a scientific test, I would also use like one of those cables that actually show the wattage that is being pushed through.
In 30 minutes.
I don't know if that's
after an
one
hour,
of those.
And 100% takes almost exactly an hour and 15.
Yeah, so 100% really depends. I don't like charging your phone to 100 hours, 100%. I prefer to keep it at around 90 to 95%. 80% is too little. Now that my iPhone 15 Pro Max has a degraded battery, it's like at 86%. And with how 5G is here in Berlin, it's really never great when I'm on 5G. It's always enough to get through the day, but still, yeah. So but I guess for just scientific charging here. But then again, this is something that I almost want the phone to decide for itself sometimes. Like between 95 and 100%, there's not that much functional difference, right? But it can make a big difference in how hot, for example, the battery has to get to still push the charge through. So whether a phone takes an hour and 15 minutes or even an hour and 45 minutes to get to 100 watts, 100%, I don't care about it that much. What I care is like, can it get in about an hour to like 90%, which is usually what my 15 Pro Max delivers.
15 minutes. faster than I
And
expected.
yeah, I would like it to be faster. I don't need it to be 100 watts, but I think if Apple can give me 40 to 50 watts reliably as peak, and then a good sustained wattage of like 35-ish, I think I would be very happy with that.
But that's
especially if the battery increases in size. That should also be noted. Like, I'm coming from a 4400 milliamp hour phone. If the next iPhone 17 Pro Max has 5000 or even a little bit more, then I definitely would like to top it up at the very least as fast as my phone in terms of percentage, but preferably even faster. At that point, I would be very happy.
The battery's small size than an advancement in charging speed.
Sure.
This is still, of course, just 25 watts.
Yep.
Or 15 if you go wireless. Now, it does heat up quickly, which I don't mind while charging, but thermals did give me a problem when driving later in the trip. And Hertz was all out of normal cars, so it rendered me a monster truck. Thanks a lot. After a few hours of
That's
using wireless
America
Android
for
Auto,
you,
the
even
phone got so
California, I
hot
guess.
that Google Maps started crashing. Yeah, of course, right in the middle of a highway merge situation.
I guess that's something that would probably be happening. Also, nice car in that regard. Like I always like vertical screens like that because it does give you like extra control simply while you can still focus on something main. I don't like super horizontal stuff because I feel like it just encourage, like I feel like in a car it's easier to like look a tiny bit further down, right, than to look potentially all the way over there to some data that might be on the right hand side. Plus, I do like cars that still give you a decent amount of like actual physical buttons. This might be a little bit too much, given that most of the things you would do, you are probably better off doing on the touch screen. But like, I do like that you don't have like digital controls for like your fans and whatever. I do like that a lot.
Great. But back to Mountain View, and fast forward an overnight to Google I/O Day 1. Another early morning start. Coffee paid for with Google Wallet. Email triage, which reminds me, I don't like this new bubble design.
Yeah, by the way, I forgot he said that when I initially watched the video. Yeah, I just wanted to say the same thing. This looks terrible, and the reason why it looks terrible it really has nothing to do with, that this is specifically a bad design, but I feel like throughout the system, you're getting like all kinds of differently rounded shapes, some more boxy rounded stuff, especially now with Android 16, Material 3 Expressive and whatever. And you get like this, not even fully boxy stuff, but like this is the kind of icon that's rumored to be potentially coming to iOS 16. But then you have a full-on circle here. You have circles over here. Like, it really looks disconnected at that point. Like, if at least this was a full-on circle, I would kind of understand it, but it's really not great. Riley, the phone is so boring. This review is, oh my God, part of my screen is covered, is worse than the mostly camera iPhone 16 review. Yeah, this is I think that this is partially why we haven't gotten like MKBHD reviews for this or like Mr. Who's the Boss reviews. And I think partially is to blame that this phone is literally like a Galaxy S25 Plus with a smaller battery, smaller cooling, and a slightly different camera, like compromise even. I won't even call it a solution because I don't think it's a great thing it tries to do for the camera. But yeah, this phone is boring, but we have to get through it. We do cover the competition here. I wish we got actually more like highly produced reviews of like the Oppo Find X8 Pro. In fact, right now we are starting to get rumors for the Oppo Find X9 Pro and Ultra even. The Vivo X200s, we have looked into some of it. I feel like some of it was just a little bit too positive almost, like when I look at Mr. Who's the Boss. But I guess when it comes to Samsung, I guess because it sells better in the West, that's why we get better reviews for this than for like actually exciting like Chinese products. But then again, with those Chinese products, I know that a lot of you in my community, including me, you're also a little bit impartial in a negative sense to those products because of how aggressively they copy like iOS, especially for stuff like their control center equivalents and stuff like that. Riley, this is your anti-consumer phone and he is trying to make it seem cool. I think he is trying to say it's not bad, but I feel like that's always a weird perspective to take for an $1,100 product, because like the iPhone 16 Pro Max, right, with a larger screen, better battery life, better cameras, better performance, better sustained cooling and everything, right? By this point, the iPhone 16 Pro Max started at $1199. That was half a year ago. You can easily get it at around $1099 right now. So I feel like the fact that he's trying to compare it so aggressively to the Flip is a bit misleading. And it's Diablo, man. I haven't seen you in like months, like almost a year, wasn't it? Like I think I saw you last during when you joined, I believe, for the M4 MacBook videos, but I could be wrong. Nevertheless, welcome back to the stream, bro.
The notification shade. Keeping Instagram fed with mildly entertaining takes. Shooting the keynote with a camera that wasn't designed
I also have to
with
say, he
telephoto in
does
mind.
speak very
Sample from
slowly.
Making sure there aren't any surprises in the media kit. Checking again to see if the now bar will surprise me with any AI that's actually useful.
Nope.
It doesn't. In the media lounge.
I guess this is a criticism that I wish he would like voice a little bit more aggressively, right? Because I believe many reviewers talked about how Galaxy AI is in general pretty decent at this point, and I'm fine with that. The integration with Google Gemini and whatever. But I feel like the fact that you like dedicate a decent part of like your main phone's user interface by creating this page, and the fact that it's so underwhelming should be getting more criticism. Imagine if MacBook Air was $1399 and Pro was $1499. This is giving the same vibes. Yeah, like it's basically like a confused lineup, at least when it comes to MSRPs. I would argue that given that the Ultra can now be had for less than this, it's not actually a confused lineup. It's a bad lineup because you should get the Ultra, and the Plus already was cheaper and can now easily be had for around $900. So yeah, Apple does sometimes have those issues. Like for example, when you configure a Mac Mini very high-endish with the M4 Pro, you get very close to the M4 Max Studio at that point, to the point where when it comes to a very similar storage and RAM configuration, they're kind of overlapping, but you get the Mac Studio and the better chip like with the other device, so for like $100 more or something like that. So yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah, your first donator, seen that you've grown a lot. You had around 10 to 15K back then. Yeah, oh yeah, now I remember you even better. You like to you like to remind me that you're like my original sugar daddy. Well, come on, sugar daddy, like, let it rain.
And editing more social posts. And before 3 p.m., we're below.
By the way, can we please comment very briefly? I don't want to make this into a rant because obviously it's a personal choice.
Social posts. And before
look at this bullshit. Like, I know this is, by the way, not Samsung. What is it? Is this Gboard? Or is it the Microsoft keyboard that you can install? Like, it looks so freaking bad. Well, I know you can choose it. I've played around with it on iOS too. It's so bad looking. Like, I understand being playful and whatever, but like there is like a difference between being playful and like having no taste.
PM, we're below 15%.
So basically what he's trying to say in about 60% of the video now is that the battery life is not really reliable for high-end / enthusiast users.
These are not typical days for the target customer. I'm using a style-forward phone as a power user. So yeah, what do you know? It's not
Jesus, how
living
many
up to the workload for which it wasn't designed.
That's
actually better than I thought it would.
We don't have that here in Europe.
You won't be able to rely on it for
that
an
looks like a
heavy
keyboard
day
theme
in
from
normal
yeah,
life.
this looks like This looks like a keyboard theme that you would install on iOS only to show that you installed like an iOS keyboard, right? Like an alternative keyboard. When was it that Apple allowed alternative keyboards? I believe it was either iOS 8 or iOS 9. I believe it was iOS 8 that they allowed that API on the system, right? So if you think about it, we are now going on to like what, iOS 18? Wait, no, we are at iOS 18, so we are going on to iOS 19. So we're looking at well over a decade ago. This is the kind of keyboard you would install just to say, oh, look, I'm contrarian. I'm not using Apple's keyboard.
You got to carry a battery pack if you want to be fully covered on this one.
Yeah, and again, you got to carry a battery pack, but you're left with less options than even a comparably priced iPhone.
Which would be fine if we were still in a lithium-ion only world.
Like, think about it. Think about the iPhone 15 Pro Max, right? It has technically a worse chip, right, with an A17 Pro. But don't forget, it has better cooling than this product, and it has well over 10% higher battery capacity. Plus, it has a screen that actually gets brighter. It has a 3-camera setup on the back, including a very nice 5x telephoto. You can get it for less than $1,000 with 256 gigabytes. You can probably get the 512 gigabyte version for $1,100, probably even for less than that. So would you get like the same thinness and lightness? No, but like you get a nice titanium build. The phone is only 220 grams and no need for a case. It's even more durable than this because at least it's not as thin. And if you want to connect like a wireless battery pack, by which I mean wireless charging one, you don't need to put a case in between.
But I can't help but wonder what might have been possible had Samsung packed in more power density in the form of a silicon carbon battery, which has been used to great effect in other ultra-thin phones and would have been perfect here. We've been complaining about Samsung's ultra-conservative battery and charging.
I still cannot be a fan of the Galaxy Watch Ultra design. It just screams like, can you imagine how good it would look in comparison, right? Okay, let's say you finally get rid of that iconic bezel. Okay, unfortunate, but imagine if that screen was just a rounded square, basically, all throughout it, much more immersive, an actual size benefit, like that's good for accessibility, usage in difficult environments, even when you're working out. Like I find it very beneficial to have this large screen on my Ultra. In a way, like it doesn't have any curves, it doesn't have anything that like blocks my finger in any way. Like it just feels like so random that you have, for one, you have the material of the phone, the watch itself. Then you have this very nice looking, in my opinion, like chamfered edge. Then you have like raw metal. Well, I guess it's anodized, but you know what I mean. And then you have the bezel, like an inner bezel, and then you have the screen. And I'm like, why?
Approach for far too long. It's just another example of the company's unwillingness to show ambition in some areas.
Yeah. And all the thing you did, by the way, it's an ambitious thing to have this solution. By the way, Apple failed with oh my God, what was it? It's not Air Charger. What was it called? What? Wait, what? I always forget. What was it called? Like, you know, that Apple wireless charger that didn't materialize? Jesus, I cannot be the only one. Apple wireless charger fail, I guess. No. Here's a closer. Air power. Yeah, air power. I want to call it air charge. I don't know why. But like Apple failed with air power, and guess what they did afterwards? They came out with MagSafe and arguably solved almost all issues that people had with wireless charging. And here we have, years later, MagSafe being introduced back on the iPhone freaking 12, and Apple even coming to the open standards board for Qi 2, and Samsung, like, it would literally cost Samsung only the cost of the magnets to implement Qi 2, right? Not even talking about making it somehow compatible with absolutely every MagSafe accessory or whatever. But like, why do we still need a case?
I was mostly pleased with the Edge
hello,
as a
Renee.
camera.
You massive freaking tease, restarting your channel, but then like not posting anything on it for months at this
Though
point.
that's likely due to my decision to compare it to one of Samsung's least photo-focused phones.
Yeah, like you can even see just the camera size difference.
From the Empire State to Silicon Valley, the Edge cleaned the Flip 6's
I also have to say the Flip 6 just looks objectively bad. So yeah, this is not a great, it's not a great look for Samsung to even have such a trashy camera. At this point, I would actually prefer for it to just have a single camera, maybe be it slightly wider than the usual 24 to 22 millimeters, maybe make it 20 millimeters, right? But give it a nice high resolution, a thick optical system. Like, this is just terrible.
Fuck. With the clamshell only coming out ahead in a handful of examples.
The fact that it even does this at all now is actually a detriment to this S25 Edge, because technically the Flip shouldn't come out ahead in any comparison.
Pushing the phone's zoom to its limit at the Shoreline Amphitheater, I got usable results out of the Edge more often than I expected.
Netwo TV, hello, I'm a logo designer. Would you like to have a logo redesign that's based on your name or something else to have a unique, memorable branding? Well, you can find my Discord in the description of this channel. If you join me over there, or you can go to Blue Sky, contact me over there for stuff like that. I guess you can send me maybe an early or a sample of your work. I'm not going to force you to work for free. I am a center-left guy who is very pro-union and shit like that. But I'm not going to discuss it during the stream. But hey, thank you for joining.
Expected. And even after dark, when things got blurry, as they tend to.
Yeah, this is the moments where I actually would like to see like proper comparisons to like Pro and Ultra devices, like seeing, because a lot of that shit has been figured out in recent years.
To do.
Like, yeah, probably not a situation where it gets this bad, but like some other shots look like they would be pretty manageable for a current day flagship.
For the most part, both the main array and the selfie shooter showed up when I needed them to.
Yeah, but I mean, it's California with a metric fuck ton of light over your head. Like, even like an iPhone 12 would perform well in those scenarios.
Coffee cheers. Bam.
Do I know her? Does she run some kind of YouTube channel?
If all this
She
feels a
looks
bit
familiar.
rote, yeah, that's the nature of a phone like this. Built for one
The
of two
Verge.
reasons. Either Samsung wanted to get ahead
Trying
of
to
Apple's rumored
recognize as
iPhone
many
Air,
people
so
as I
it rushed
can, but I haven't watched as much tech media recently.
this out. And
Is
or
that Project Muhan? Yeah, I wanted to say, what is an Apple Vision Pro doing there? But I guess it's Project Muhan.
it's testing the waters to see if there's a market for a device like this before pulling out all the stops and actually trying for the real one. And that wouldn't be out of character for the company. It did much the same with the Galaxy Alpha in 2014, which pioneered many of the CMF choices that would make their way into the Galaxy S line the following year.
Okay.
If that's what's happening here, then
Pointed that out in my last video analyzing the S25 Edge. It does have that unfortunate not symmetrical USB-C port. Obviously, we talked about how Apple has had to do that on certain devices in the past and might have to do it on the iPhone 17 Air again. One thing that I don't like is it looks like almost everything about it is asymmetrical, or it might just be a perspective, but it looks like the speaker and the headphone jack, Jesus Christ, the SIM card tray are both not symmetrical here, or not exactly in the middle, but that might just be like an optical trick from a little portion here being reflected.
in that respect, I'm glad the S25 Edge exists.
That's pro. No, they are actually in the middle. Just the USB port isn't. That's because of the stupid leather D-brand
It's a sign
accessory
that
on the
Samsung's
back.
design ambition
Look how bad it freaking looks. It doesn't look like real leather. Why? This looks gaudy and cheap. This is not the patina, right, that you would like to create on leather. Those are just fucking like scratches. Looks like it's being abused.
Isn't completely dead.
I
That the
I
rumors
thought
of
for
an
a second he might have something over the cameras too.
internal reboot of the company's aspirational spirit might be in the early stages of bearing fruit.
What? Wait, what? It's still copying Apple left and right. Okay, now I'm starting to agree more with you, Riley. This is a little bit too apologetic.
If you don't care about any of that, but just want a thin and easily guaranteed to be more exciting, versatile, colorful, and just fun than this
Okay,
product.
yeah, so fun to me means absolutely nothing when it comes to this kind of technology. I have fun with games. I have fun with immersive media or good media in general, right? And I guess I have fun when the screen is good, the speakers are good to deliver to me, when the performance is good, when the sustained performance is good because it allows me to play my games longer, to watch my YouTube videos longer, to go on Crunchyroll and have great speakers when I'm playing a little bit of music. But the form factor being fun has never meant anything to me. Now, there are core form factors that I agree can be more versatile. Net TV D Brands Area 51 yellow skin looks good. Which one is I think it's one of the lesser D Brand Area 51. I think I saw Linus doing an ad for that. Yeah, I have to say that doesn't look bad. But at least it has like a clear motif, right? It wouldn't be my cup of tea, but at least I get what it's supposed to be. That actually looks quite cool. Like I think that actually doesn't look bad. But like just like that cheap looking leather, that just wasn't for me. If it even is leather at this point.
Product could ever hope to be. But then again, I'm a foldable freak and a phone nerd whose opinions have nothing to do with mainstream buying habits.
That's, by the way, why I do why I do react to MrMobile here. It's not because I think that he is the greatest, whatever, but for one, I don't think he does a bad job. I don't think he is biased like for the companies. I think he can be biased for like specific form factors and design decisions. But the main thing is I like about him, he will acknowledge that like, oh, my opinion might not really be mainstream, so keep that in mind.
So if my take on the Edge is anything like my opinion of the S25 Ultra, I'm sure this thing will sell.
Yeah, he gave it a pretty negative review as far as I remember.
Record numbers too.
The S25 Ultra is selling better than the previous generations. That being said, there is a question to be had how much it might cannibalize other like Samsung flagships. Like the Fold doesn't seem to be doing too well, and the other models in the S25 lineup are not too hot. So I just wonder if maybe similar to iPhones, a lot of people are just migrating to the Pros and staying there. And I think something like that might be the case with the Galaxy S Ultra. That being said, that's about it for the MrMobile review. I think he gave pretty reasonable, pretty sometimes detailed, but decent impressions of the camera, the battery life. I still think some reviewers get shit repeatedly wrong. Like, for example, when they talk about screen brightness, they always mention that 2600 nits that has absolutely nothing to do with all screen SDR brightness. That's just something you get on a small portion of the screen in HDR content. I do think that he also failed to mention more technologies that Samsung could have utilized to make this a better product. He mentioned silicon carbon batteries. I think he should have mentioned like the anti-reflective coating of the S25 Ultra. I think he does mention that it doesn't have it, but that's not quite, I think, the approach you should have. I think you should be talking to people about, oh, actually keep in mind that it's not just a good feature, right, because it makes your screen more readable, but it also has considerations for battery life and for cooling, right? If you run your display less bright because it's less reflective, you can have longer battery life and you generate less heat, resulting in potentially less overheating, like what we saw with him. It's a bit of a he obviously would understand that if confronted with it, but I do think that this is like a conclusion that I think should be included to just inform consumers of actually the benefits of certain choices. That being said, we are done after over an hour, Jesus Christ, with Samsung. And we are moving to Apple here. In fact, all the stuff that's primarily Apple focused here does come from Mark Gurman's latest Power On newsletter. I apologize, I didn't stream yesterday when it was a little bit more fresh, but I had a family emergency come up that I had to deal with. So I am back today. And this concerns DubDub, which is happening in less than 2 weeks at this point, believe it or not. And specifically, we talked about a Vision OS-like inspired design coming to iOS, macOS, and with iOS also iPadOS, because those are very intrinsically linked. And one part of that redesign is also beyond just that glass aesthetic and whatever of Vision Pro. Is also a focus on making iOS, iPadOS, macOS more cohesive. So we've speculated actually on this channel that, for example, the Mac dock and the iPad dock behave in very different ways. So that would be a good candidate. We've talked about how Control Center on Mac is very different from the iPhone, and that could be subject to like a more uniform approach. But obviously, we haven't gotten as many details as we would like. We do know that the overall redesign is codenamed Solarium. So again, we've covered how this might mean it's more vibrant, it's more light focused, like bright. It has elements that are reflective and shiny and transparent, right? And I mean, it's called after glass rooms that allow in sunlight. So yeah, that makes sense. Riley, how many times they will redesign watchOS? Well, I would argue that as often as it takes, because I don't think that watchOS ever got this redesign, right? watchOS from the very beginning looked like iOS 7, right, with its icons and everything. But the things that gradually changed of watchOS are actually more functional than design things, right? I would argue. The way that Siri kind of became a big focus of watchOS 10 and how complications kind of moved away in favor of widgets, and how everything changed from the from 3D touch to haptic touch and stuff like that. But when it comes to actually like different icons, a very different feel to the OS, I don't think that watchOS has actually been redesigned that often. It feels like that because I think that Apple always talks up their smallish changes on watchOS as like big redesigns. But watchOS has never gotten something as comprehensive as iOS 7 in its history because it came out after iOS 7, right? The new look is sleeker and more modern, which again, however you define modern is up to you. Sounds like a good time to pick up a Series 9. Then yeah, I think that's actually a good. I've heard from some people that they don't want the Series 10 because it technically has like slightly thicker borders, bezels than the Series 9. However, it is thinner, it is lighter, it has a more modern chip. But yeah, if you can save a lot more money by going with a Series 9, and as you were saying, $240 brand new, I honestly think that's a good choice. Also think that either an Ultra 1 or an Ultra 2, depending, of course, if you can even wear something this big, is a good choice, but that's a little bit more situational. I think this will be an exciting update. I'm pretty sure it will come to a lot of watches. Maybe Apple cuts off, I don't know, the Series 6 at this point. Series 7, 8, 9, 10, and this year 11 is still plenty of watches to support. And there's also room now for a new SE now that the old one is getting a little bit old. And yeah, as you're saying, you can get like a 2-gen old, like mainline Apple Watch for like sometimes less than a MSRP Apple Watch SE, and it features like way more. And yeah, I know the Ultra is more expensive. I'm not saying it's comparable in price. I'm saying if you need it and if you feel drawn to it, that's different. You can still get it for a good deal in comparison to the MSRP. The approach takes many of its cues from visionOS, which if you used to visionOS Pro, probably not too many of you, feels a lot fresher than today's versions of iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. Okay, I always feel like statements like these are a little bit weird because I've argued this on this channel that I think that visionOS needs to be more aggressive differently in terms of like adopting transparency and translucency and glass-like elements because it's designed for like pass-through and to show you the real world around. That's not the case all the time for the iPhone and the iPad and the Mac, which have like 2D, one screen in front of you. But okay, I guess at least to Mark Gurman, we know visionOS feels fresher than Apple's other operating system. One of the major themes this year is consistency. We talked about that already, and unification across the OSs, which will be especially apparent when comparing Macs and iPads. I specifically hope that while Apple does not adopt full-on macOS for iPads, I hope they do give it some crucial features that, for example, would let an app like OBS finally be viable on iPadOS. Like, I wouldn't mind doing some of my streams in future from my iPad rather than my Mac. When I broke the news earlier this year about the new look, I noted it would come to iOS, macOS, and iPadOS, but it will actually go further. That to me makes a lot of sense because I think leaving something greatly behind looks bad. It works with individual features. Like, for example, when Apple makes a new control center or a new widget style, and one year they bring it to the iPhone, and then only the next year do they bring it to the iPad and to the Mac. The main excuse is, oh, we designed it first for the iPhone. We really thought deeply, like how can we bring it to the larger screen, the different aspect ratio, the mouse and keyboard user interface, whatever, of like the Mac or even the iPad, right? When it comes to a design that actually looks a lot different, right? Like it's not an extra feature that you can find on iPhone that isn't yet on iPad, but like the icons change, the control center looks vastly different, right? I always feel like it's good when that happens simultaneously. And similar to how Nintendo sometimes sits on for months on a game before they launch it, right? Because they're waiting for the perfect marketing period, or they're waiting for it to coincide with some other announcement, right? I want Apple to take their time. Look, if for example the new design was only ready for iOS this year, I really wouldn't like it to come out and then wait a year until it comes to macOS and iPadOS. It's acceptable to me, again, when it happens to one individual feature, even a big one. But when it's the entire look and feel of the OS, I feel like it would start feeling jarring to go from your iPhone to your iPad to your Mac, which I've always believed felt incredibly consistent. Even before the focus on more consistency. So I really appreciate the priorities that Apple has laid out for themselves this year. However, now we know it's not just iOS, macOS, and iPadOS. Thanks to Mark Gurman, we know it comes to all of Apple's operating systems. The main two visual ones, right, because HomeOS doesn't have a visual interface, are of course tvOS, coming to your Apple TV, and watchOS, coming to your Apple Watch. Both will be redesigned to make them more popular, larger siblings, while visionOS will get some adjustments in cases where the changes make sense for a headset. That's a very vague statement, but I guess he also, in previous rumors, outlined that he thinks that visionOS 3 will be a relatively big update. So maybe Apple makes Vision Pro and visionOS kind of like the center point of DubDub, but then keeps talking about what they've learned from it and what it now means on iPhone and iPad. But yeah, it's hard to predict the structure of DubDub. So this will look different if you have an old device and newer combo. If you have something so old that it does not get the latest iOS version, yes, it would look different. But not. I would argue probably every watch in the last 4 years. With Apple TVs, I'm definitely thinking both Apple TV, all Apple TV 4K models. I forget there are now 3 of those. The Apple A10X version, the Apple A12 version, and the Apple A15 version. I think all of those will get the redesign. Maybe Apple finally lets go of the HD versions. With Apple Watch, again, maybe Series 6 is the cutoff. I could see the Series 7 being it. I definitely don't think that like Series 5 gets it or anything. With the iPhone, it's very likely that Apple cuts off A12 products, right? So that would leave basically the iPhone 11 generation and up. On the iPad, similar thing. It's a little bit different because iPads sometimes have different amounts of RAM than iPhones, and so. But I definitely could see still like the A12X 2018 iPad Pros being updated because those chips are old and stuff like that. Isn't Series 6 dropping? It could, but like again, it depends a little bit on what Apple is exactly targeting. It could be that Apple gives it to like almost every Apple Watch that has like a gigabyte of memory, right? Which is a specification they haven't updated in years and years. But sometimes they like to get rid of older stuff simply because even if the chips are similar, even if the display sizes are similar, designing drivers and everything for more and more products is getting difficult unless you want Apple to start being like a Microsoft like entity that has like hundreds of thousands of employees literally. That's not Apple's MO. Yeah, I know. For the Apple Watch, it can suck a little bit, but because you think like, oh, functionally there was no difference between Series 7 and 8. Why should one be cut off and not the other down the line, right? But at some point, a cutoff just happens. But again, we could be surprised, right? I was surprised when iOS 17 still supported Apple A12 products like the iPhone XS and XS Max. My grandma still uses my old XS Max. So again, I am speculating sometimes. I'm not saying, and I'm not justifying any of it. I'm just trying to prepare you guys. And also, DubDub is in 2 weeks, so we will know it by then. So probably don't do your purchases right now, at least not for anything that might be pretty old by some standards. Like definitely don't buy a Series 5, but also maybe don't buy a Series 6, right? That's about how I would look at it. And while iPad minis might not change too much between generations, like don't forget there's a huge difference like performance-wise between the A17 Pro chip and the A12 chip, and also with the amount of memory that older iPads, for example, have. There's a huge difference for today. Now I'm buying 5 devices today before DubDub. Well, you can send that money to me right now, bro. So while iOS 7 in 2013 was the biggest ever visual change to the iPhone software, the latest overhaul will be much more widely felt. Yeah, that makes sense. To that point, we obviously didn't have the Apple Watch yet. The Apple TV was, I would argue, a less ambitious product. While it still did the main things, Apple did not update it that often. People didn't like the old Siri remote. Yeah. I feel it. Plus, of course, there was definitely nothing like Apple Vision Pro, and macOS looked much more different back in the day during the iOS 7 release than iOS. That said, Apple risks getting criticized for tinkering with the wrong thing. Many companies are talking about using AI as a replacement for current operating system, and none of that is happening right now. This is actually goes back, and I believe Rene Ritchie actually covered it pretty well in his day. People talked about how devices like Amazon Alexa would eventually replace a lot of other hardware we use because we could just talk to our hardware. But I promise you, even with the current much better AI, we're still over a decade away from actually replacing the good, well-built hardware we currently have for smartphones, tablets, watches. All of that hardware, by the way, does not do everything like with AI, right? Like heart rate monitoring on your Apple Watch and fitness tracking, right? What AI replaces that operating system? What AI like influence on the design of the OS has an impact on the apps where I see my fitness data, where I see my day-to-day plans and everything. This has absolutely nothing to do with AI, and I believe this is like the 5th time I'm commenting on this. Like Mark Gurman just keeps shoving AI mentions into his freaking Power On newsletter, right, saying, oh, Apple faces all this competition from AI. AI is going to replace this hardware, and AI is going to replace actually all operating system, and ChatGPT is going to be your main app for everything. And I'm like, okay, maybe, but like, does that really mean that right now we should give up on like refining, redesigning, improving like the main state of operating systems? Should everything I do rely on a server like miles away, consuming energy enough to like burn down the freaking rainforest for it? Like, Jesus Christ, this is like pseudo-analytical thinking, right? And this is where I'm trying to say, Mark Gurman is trying to act like an analyst rather than an Apple leaker guy. And he just doesn't have it in him. Apple, in contrast, is focusing on making the traditional OS approach more elegant. By the way, he's saying many companies, but don't forget, Google just introduced a new design language for Android and for Wear OS. Right? So one of the most AI-obsessed companies in the world just announced a redesign. In fact, you can already download and install the first beta. So who is he talking about? Is he talking about Amazon, who never really had like fully functional products to begin with, right? Like, what are you looking at? Like Fire tablets, right? Yeah, they might be more focused on AI. Microsoft still is going on Windows. Microsoft right now is currently redesigning Windows 11, probably Windows 12 at this point. Who knows? To make sure that it looks good, it works well on handhelds. Windows still has trash sleep-wake mechanism. It handles suspended applications very poorly. This is why the Steam Deck with a much older chip often ends out outperforming Windows handhelds with like 60% more battery capacity and 2 times larger processors that are 2 generations newer and on a much more advanced processing node. Yes, the traditional OS approach is very, very important, and other companies still acknowledge it. It's only idiots who think that AI will replace the entire pipeline of you accessing search engines, social media platforms. Yes, AI will enhance all of those things. And for some things, like I believe that AI will replace the traditional search engine in many ways. Like I think that, for example, Google right now is giving pretty decent AI results for most regular Google searches, even if you aren't logged in. Like previously, you would need to be logged in, so Google actually might want some of your data, right? But these days, you get AI results whether you want them or not. So yeah, this is a constant criticism I have of Mark Gurman. In fact, like the way he talks about also like the Johnny Ive and OpenAI partnership, like there is zero actual like substantive criticism. For example, he could talk about how $6.5 billion is an atrocious price. There's nothing to justify it. He doesn't talk about the fact that like Lafrom has like 50 guys, right? Like, sure, you don't always need the biggest design team, but what exactly are you revolutionizing? Like the iPhone camera team by itself, right? The people working from everything from the sensors with Sony. They are buying the sensor, but they still are contributing to it. Then, of course, they're designing the drivers and everything. The people working on the algorithm to combine multiple frames. The people working on the image signal processor that's built onto the main processor, right? The way that, of course, then you have to optimize everything from this selfie camera to all the different back cameras, right? That team is 1,000 people, right? The people working on the entire back end for Apple's cameras, right? That's not all the people working on Apple's processors. That's not all people working on the chassis for the iPhone, the iPad, whatever. Those are not all of Apple's metallurgical teams that working from everything from the Apple Watch chassis to different Apple Watch bands, right? And now, like, people are like looking at this bullshit where it's like 50 people coming in, and Johnny Ive, after years of being out of tech and lazily designing some luxurious bullshit for like charities and whatever. Now people are saying, like, for one, Apple has flopped in artificial intelligence. Apple has only announced artificial intelligence less than a year ago. Right? Like, where are we? Like, Google, by the way, had flopped with with Google Intelligence stuff, with AI, when they launched, like, their image generation was garbage. Their search results, their AI-generated search results were giving you recommendation to put freaking glue on your pizza so your cheese sticks better to the pizza dough, right? And nobody claims these days that Google has flopped with AI. And that was just a year ago as well. So the idea that Apple has flopped in artificial intelligence and cannot overcome any shortcomings, it's the same bullshit when people claim that Apple could not catch up to smartwatches who launched like a year and a half before the Apple Watch. It's the same bullshit of people who claim that Apple's tablet would not be able to compete with full-on Windows tablets with, you know, like those like laptops that folded in half, those ancient things that actually only had like, not like multi-touch screens, but like capacitive ones where you had like a very hard stylus. Like, it's the same bullshit. I'm not saying Apple will do the same things in AI as Google and Microsoft. Microsoft is a software company that's selling server space to all companies. Google is a search engine company. Of course, these companies need to push the boundaries of generative AI more than Apple. But Apple still is going to be relevant in the AI space. So yeah, this is why, by the way, I'm not even trying to analyze this, because that would just result in a huge rant. I guess maybe leading up to, maybe once the actual product is more clear, like the thing that Johnny Ive is working on for OpenAI, maybe by that point I would go through bullshit like this. But right now I would just lose my voice from getting too angry. So Apple tinkering AI. Apple AI will be, or just AI, I guess, when you want to call it Apple Intelligence, underlying technology will be open up to developers. That makes sense, especially for on-device stuff, similar to how Apple offers like cloud infrastructure to App Store developers. That's very similar thing here. And then, yeah, then it gets a little bit too political for my taste. I don't actually know where he brings up the HomePad in this article. Would Apple have ever acquired Johnny Ive's company? That makes no sense. because Johnny wanted specifically to not keep working on technology for a while. Now he has come down a little bit. He had some rest and relaxation, and now he wants the big paycheck. He'll probably make like 3 gadgets for OpenAI. We've heard already that Minchi Kuo rumor about the thing you wear on your neck, and then he will leave the design business as a very rich man with very big accomplishments for Apple and a very big paycheck from OpenAI. So Sam Altman can go fuck himself. Yeah, where's the HomePad? Why can I not find it? Is that not on the Power newsletter here? I guess I can find the rumor anywhere else too. By the way, some public service announcements. WhatsApp is now finally has an iPad app. So speaking of the HomePad, that one is coming from Mark Gurman as well, and it's rumored for a launch later this year, basically at the end of the year. I assume by that point it would also have an OS, like at this point, I guess HomeOS, that's also designed in lockstep with the latest iOS design, the latest iPadOS design, and whatever. So that's my assumption. There is still the question of, obviously, the exact form factor, whether it's going to be as premium audio focused as the regular big boy HomePod, and of course, what processor it will run to enable on-device Apple Intelligence. We've had rumors before that it could be pushed into early next year, because that's the time it will take for Apple to actually implement like new AI stuff, right? But seems like Apple will have like their new Siri and everything ready by like the very end of this year at the very latest. So that's at least encouraging to hear, because I don't assume that they would launch this product before Apple Intelligence is actually like in a very workable state. That to me is very important, because when I look at the iPhone, the iPad, the Mac, Vision OS, Apple Watch, Apple TV, AirTags, all that stuff, I see potential for enhancements through Apple Intelligence. Absolutely. However, I do not share that like they're just gateways to like visual intelligence, like the way Mark Gurman tried to predict that there would be like an Apple Watch with a camera for visual intelligence, so you could walk around like this, right? And like the example that I'm now giving for the 3rd time, making you think I'm some kind of pervert, but like when you're like pissing next to a guy at the urinal, so you can film them, I guess, with your camera-enabled Apple Watch, or even better, your camera-enabled AirPods, right, where you would just aim like this. It's so freaking ridiculous. Yeah, but when it comes to a product like this that's primarily connected to a home assistant, I do believe that it makes no sense to launch this product before that voice assistant, especially now that it's also a visual assistant in so many ways, is actually up to snuff. Does it have to match Google Gemini or ChatGPT's latest versions? Absolutely not. But it should be capable of all the core features that Apple advertised for Apple Intelligence during last year's WWDC. Primarily personal context. I do not like on-screen awareness is probably not as important for a product like this. It's more for the iPhone. It's where you have like a browser, so you and your text messages and everything. I do wonder how fully featured this OS will be. Like I guess if it has a FaceTime app, will it have like a messages app? It's hard to tell. It's hard to predict. But I guess we'll see. I also wonder if Apple might announce it at DubDub and like launch it later. That's something they sometimes do. I mean, we saw it with Vision Pro, right? That took months and months to come out. We saw that with the original Apple Watch and whatever. Not sure. Most likely Apple will want to avoid like the perception that they had last year, where they announced something way too early, then it might have been subject to delays. I think it just makes more sense to make this part of the October event, right? Let's say they launch M5 Max M5 iPads, whatever, and simultaneously they announce this, and they show off whatever latest version of Apple Intelligence Siri is now coming in, like what would be at that point iOS 19.1 or 0.2, the latest version of macOS. So it would be a good way to, like, before the holiday season, to not just talk about new hardware, but also remind people, oh, that disappointment, how like people claimed we failed with artificial intelligence, like which we just saw Mark Gurman claim, right? Where was it? Apple flopped with artificial intelligence. I cannot find this. Where is it? Wait, what happened? But there will be. Oh, Rosa, thank you so much for joining. That place, Google. Yeah, I don't know where it was, but like we just read that he claims that Apple flopped with Apple Intelligence. Maybe my eyes are just tired. I had to look at computers all day at work. By the way, guys, we have plenty of people watching right now. Please, if you're actually enjoying this, leave a like and comment. I love knowing what you guys want to see me cover. Whenever there are surprisingly more people coming in, new people coming in, I do love reading your recommendations, your agreements and stuff. And of course, if you have something that you would like to see me react to, I am open to doing that as well. And if you want to support this channel directly, there's super chats, super stickers, the option to become a channel member, and the ability to become a Patreon supporter as well. Thank you so much for just considering supporting. Yeah, but I'm just saying that like it would behoove Apple to spread out certain announcements instead of packing everything into DubDub. I think if DubDub really focuses on like a comprehensive redesign for like every major Apple operating system, and then the last one on the menu will actually be HomeOS, then yeah, I do think it will be time. It will be too much to talk about everything that Apple has up its sleeve for this year at DubDub. Instead, show them new major OSs at DubDub, leave the hardware to September and October, and when you have new hardware like a HomePad, also show off the new Home OS, and with it also the latest capabilities of Apple Intelligence and Siri. But that's just my prediction, I guess, and my recommendation in a way to avoid some of the attacks that Apple has faced. I mean, it doesn't take a genius, right? Apple Intelligence, what was it? Disaster, right? There are like 3 or 4 videos with those titles. Right, inside the Apple Intelligence disaster from Snazzy Labs just 12 days ago. What went wrong with Apple Intelligence from Apple Explained. Apple AI crisis explained by Marquez with 7 million views. Yeah, Apple struggles to crack AI, even from like Bloomberg. Wait, is that? Yeah, that's featuring Mark Gurman. Oh, my Mark. Yeah, some things will never change, I guess. Apple Intelligence failed. Here is why, by Zone of Tech, right? Maybe we could even go through some of those videos at some point there. I guess you guys can let me know if maybe one of them is like good enough to react to right now. But yeah, you also see like people all already covering the redesign Apple AI disaster by a channel I've never heard of. I guess. Apple Intelligence delay isn't a failure. The problem is bigger than Apple. That might actually be the smartest title I've seen, because this was my take as well. That I think that when I believe John Gruber wrote that article, right, that something is rotten at Cupertino, right, by which he means, of course, Apple, because they are from Cupertino, that basically AI, but Apple is treating AI differently than they usually do, like their operating systems or their hardware. And my counter was, I don't even fully disagree, but I think that what's rotten is AI itself, and it is rotting throughout all the others too. Because even if AI sometimes deliver a good product, which I'm not above using ChatGPT myself, and I just mentioned like some of the useful search engine results in Google search that are now AI powered, right? But I do feel that AI leads all those companies to make way too early announcements, way too overpromising, way too overhype, right? Like, even think about the rumor mill, right? Think about that. People predicted last year that by July of 2024, we would have ChatGPT 5, right? And instead we got like 4.0, 4.1, 4.5, and some of them are not even that much better than the predecessors, right? All of that hype is very easy to like manipulate. It's very like crypto and NFT shit. Like, I do believe that AI has a much better future than NFTs and crypto and whatever, but it still is rotting all those big companies who are seeing massive rises to their profit margins from all the server business they're getting, right? Primarily, we are looking at Microsoft and Google and whatever. We don't actually see AI generate that much money on the ground yet, but other companies are hoping that down the line they will be able to sell you crazy subscriptions. We've already seen like OpenAI price like their most premium ChatGPT version at $200 a month, right? Not even like $100, but like $200. It's absolutely bonkers. And Apple is not in that business. Apple themselves have said, oh, we are making AI to make our products better. We are a hardware-first company. We do, of course, make software that powers that hardware. We make services that enhance those hardware gadgets. But we are not going to suddenly be in the business of making a chatbot that's powered by 1 billion servers consuming more energy than like the country that I was born in. So, yeah, again, AI is a pretty divisive topic. Some people absolutely love it. Some people absolutely hate it. I think most smart people understand that it's going to be part of our future. But then again, did The Verge do an interview with Sundar Pichai, right? And like we get like bullshit statements like AI is going to be bigger than the internet. Like, no, it's not going to be. The internet opened everything from like chat messages and Google search. And yes, we even had like AI, basic AI with a lot of internet stuff for years. And I'm like, yeah, this is the kind of statement that leads also companies to make a Google I/O that's 80 to 90% AI and put Android in like a different presentation. So yeah, if you think that AI is something that's wrong with Apple, yeah, you're just not understanding the broader industry. It's fucking up pretty much everyone. Yeah, but I think that's pretty much it, unless somebody has like some surprise suggestion of anything that I might have missed. Of course, new iPhone will upgrade camera to 200 megapixels. Okay, I guess that's a leak worth covering. I guess I will also like cover it in more detail in the future, but iPhone camera expected to jump from 48 megapixel to 200 megapixel. Every year, Apple releases new iPhones, and every year, one upgrade you can count on is camera changes. Blah, blah, blah. New cameras are expected for this year's iPhone line, such as an upgraded 24 megapixel front-facing camera, true, new 48 megapixel telephoto on the Pro models, and more. That more would maybe finally be a larger main sensor, or at least like changes to the optical system. But yeah, at least we are getting updates to those two cameras. This is coming from Weibo Leaker Digital Chat Station, so I guess that's good. This is a leap. It's coming with a future iPhone model, so we don't know which one. Apple is working on a 200 megapixel camera upgrade for the iPhone. No specific model is mentioned. Yikes. If it's next year, perhaps the new Fold. Yeah, those are predictions that are based on absolutely nothing. If it won't be until later than 2027's 20th anniversary iPhone Pro. Again, don't forget that when it comes to big sensors, some of the biggest sensors out there are actually 50 megapixel sensors from Sony. Those are the 1-inch sensors. The 200 megapixel sensors are actually smaller, so they're not necessarily better. They're like 1 by 1.3 inches and primarily from Samsung. So I'm not. This one does not necessarily make a phone more ultra premium, nor does it have to coincide with some other big update, because most likely, I also don't even think that Apple would try to make it run at 200 megapixels. If anything, I think that Apple would do quad binning down to like roughly 48 megapixels. I know they allow you to like shoot 48 megapixel full, but like the main resolution that Apple targets for the cameras these days is actually 24 megapixel. It used to be quad binned 12 megapixels. Now it's about half resolution by combining multiple photos, combining data and stuff like that. So in fact, that allows Apple by default to deliver about the same capture speed, even slightly faster, higher resolution, higher quality images than, for example, Samsung. So the fact that Samsung already ships its own 200 megapixel cameras is not necessarily a positive thing. In fact, anybody who knows about reviews for like the Galaxy S23 Ultra back in the day, those 200 megapixel cameras, was it the first one? Didn't the S22 Ultra have it? I might go to GSM Arena to find out. I know the S23 Ultra definitely had it by that point, but I'm almost thinking that it's the S22 Ultra 5G. Did it not have a... Oh, that was a 100 megapixel. Yeah, that's what hilarious to me, because again, sensor size is so important. And sensor size, by the way, if you go too large, can have negative repercussions. But for example, way too high resolutions, initially 100 and later 200 megapixels on Samsung. For one, that sensor size back in the day was actually pretty difficult to deal with for Samsung, given the optical system that sat on top. It didn't deliver great edge-to-edge sharpness. It had a very narrow focal point where like most of the image ended up like bokeh depth of field is nice, but if like instead of bokeh depth of field showing like your face all sharp and then your background all soft, that's nice. But sometimes this thing focused so aggressively on such a small part that it would be like only this part of your face is sharp because it's a little bit more forward, right? And then like from your eye level, it was not sharp. Like we saw that especially back in the day before like image signal processor enhancements and AI stuff, like pets, for example, the camera was like really bad. It would use like it would only focus on like the nose of your dog, for example. Also, like back in the day, I just want to mention Samsung used to have 40 megapixels of 1 by 2.82 inch sensor, right, for the selfie camera. Now, they didn't have the best optical system for it, so I'm not saying that this is better than the solution they have now. But think about the S25 Ultra, right? Think about it. It now has a 12 megapixel smaller sensor, but yes, it focuses a little better. It has dual pixel autofocus. So just telling you, companies, even those that increase prices, are nickel and diming you. They are delivering you not the greatest stuff sometimes. And yeah, when you look like that 108 megapixel sensor was 1 by 1.33 inches. This is basically like negligibly larger at like 1 by 1.3 inches. So just trying to tell you, you're not getting those revolutionary hardware jumps now for like the last 4 to 5 years. Like a lot of people try to like say it about, oh, Apple is not innovative and shit like that. But some stuff has just not been improving too much. And when you think, for example, about the 1-inch Chinese smartphone makers, right, who are using like the largest Sony sensors available, well, for smartphones, obviously Sony makes way larger sensors than that as well. But think about it. Some of them offered variable aperture, right? That is gone now. Sony is still trying to do variable zoom, but they're they're doing that with like some of the worst sensors, because I think there's just the way the optical system works. It just focuses on a very small area, so that they couldn't use like a huge sensor underneath. So Sony instead just gave you randomly a super large sensor for the ultra wide, but their actually innovative solution for the telephoto camera was left pretty much unchanged. Which one is it? The latest? It's the Xperia 1 Mark 7, right? It's basically their camera nomenclature. So you see 1 by 1.35 inch 48 megapixel sensor. That makes sense. 12 megapixel telephoto, f3.5, 1 by 3.5 inch sensor. Again, that's something that Apple can somewhat get away with because of just how good their ISP is, because they have really good optical image stabilization, sensor shift optical image stabilization on their telephoto, right? But then you go from this, and suddenly the ultra wide is actually a pretty great one. That's actually the sensor size of the main camera on the iPhone 16 and 16 Plus. In fact, it's way larger than actually the main camera on the iPhone 16e, which is a 1 by 2.55 inch sensor, because Apple just cheaped out on the iPhone 16e, which, yeah, even I, as an Apple sheep, can really easily acknowledge that. So, yeah, I'm just trying to tell you, don't get excited for like, oh, it's going to be 200 megapixels. They might go with 200 megapixels because Samsung offered them like a sensor at half the price of Sony. Maybe it's a more modern sensor, sure, than they're using right now as well. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be that much larger, or it will solve, for example, the main sensor on the iPhone, you cannot get too close to objects. And sure, you have the macro camera on the ultra wide for that, theoretically, but unless Apple steps up their game dramatically for the ultra wide, that quality is still going to be way worse than just holding your main sensor a little bit further away and then zooming in a little. Or even better, and like unofficial macro mode is like that 5x telephoto. Sometimes that's better than the macro mode on the ultra wide. You can go way further off than zoom in, because that's a 10x zoom versus the 0.5 on the ultra wide. Yeah, but it's an interesting rumor, and Digital Chat Station has leaked reputable stuff in the past, but I am not specifically excited for 200 megapixels. If I hear it's a larger sensor with an optical system specifically designed for a larger sensor, then I will be excited, but just resolution beyond 12 megapixel has never excited me. Like Apple going to 48 megapixels did not excite me much when like the default was still like quad bin down to 12. When Apple actually allowed 24 megapixels without impacts to like low light photography, to how fast it is to actually capture an image, that was exciting to me. And yeah, so just because Apple gives you larger number, I'm not that sycophantic. I promise you that. Seeing if Mac Rumor says anything new. Android phones with Qualcomm modems, top iPhone 16e, new 5G. Oh, what? Like, which modem was it using? Also, what's the battery life impact and stuff like that? But I guess... but hey, I guess if you're like disenchanted with the C1 modem for this year, if you're buying the base iPhone 17 or iPhone 17 Pro models, you're not actually getting the C1. And I think that Apple knows that it's primarily an efficiency solution. So if you actually want a high-end modem from Apple, that will take you until the C2, maybe even until like some point of like C2 Pro, a version that like integrates with millimeter wave. But yeah, who knows? Riley saying this is going to be the worst pre-WWDC week. why do you think that? Is that because all the rumors are basically like, oh, redesign incoming? Like, one thing that I have found disappointing is like, after so much bravado of coming back, right? Now, I understand there was all this controversy around how front page tech like pays um, like basically like they're contractors, right? People who don't like work for them regularly, but just like on a like a per video basis or whatever, right? But like a month ago, they had like this iOS 19 early preview leak. And I'm still thinking, do they really have nothing new? Because we didn't see too much. Back there, they speculated, for example, about the icon shape, right? And they told us that they don't know yet if we're going to get circular icons or icons the exact shape that we have them right now, or this medium that Google sometimes does on Android, which I wouldn't be the greatest fan of, right? But like, really, after a month, we have nothing new? And it's clearly, it's not just this, because they do post like their podcast and whatever, so they clearly haven't been canceled or anything. So that is why I will probably suffer a little during next week. I'll also probably be working a little bit more next week so that I can actually afford to like take it easier for 1 week during the dub announcements. And then I will actually have a little bit more time than usual starting mid to late July. So expect my schedule to really pick up by then. Obviously, during Dub week, I'll be streaming pretty much daily, so that's a little bit of an exception. But yeah, if you are looking forward to more MarkTech stuff, you will get it. Yeah, but that's about it for today. Thank you guys so much. I guess you get Big Mark before I leave. Big Mark tells you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Liking the video helps, of course. Commenting, don't just comment live, but also comments afterwards. As always, let me know what you would like to see me cover in other videos. Again, we cover everything from software, service, accessories, pricing, hardware, the competition across hardware, software, services. So we are not insulated here. This is not an Apple-only channel. However, unlike, for example, tvOS of Tech, this is a channel that is not ashamed to say that it's primarily an Apple channel. That's a discussion and some beef for another day, I guess. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for giving me a lively live chat. Thank you for actually beefing up the live viewership numbers. I guess the YouTube algorithm finally recognized that I'm back. And you guys know my plan leading up to WWDC. Any changes, I'll try to inform you. You can, again, find my Blue Sky here, my threads, my Patreon, and I will, if I don't forget it, also add my Discord, because I do still want us to interact in a social media way without having to go to Twitter, and I am slowly realizing that it's just not happening on Threads or Blue Sky. So, but I know that Discord is a big thing. I know Reddit is, but I'm not a big Redditor guy. So ideally, if we want to create a small, like somewhat like connected community, I would like to try doing that with Discord. So if you guys are interested, you can join me over there. And I guess we'll have discussions over there. We can also even have phone calls here. So if somebody wants to chime in and I guess debate me on some opinion I have or whatever, I'm absolutely fine with that. So that's one aspect that I just wanted to mention that I will be expanding upon in future videos and in future streams. And it should be pretty much figured out by the time we get to Dub. And especially after Dub and seeing like I'll be producing almost daily content for a little bit. Thank you guys so much for everything. I'll see you next time. Thank you again. This is Mark Tech tuning out.